I used to work for CBS, not in the glamorous, production end of things,
Right.
but I used to be a recruiter, which meant that I would stand on a street corner and try to get people to come in to test their shows. At that time, your phone booths are kind of a thing of the past now, and there was a phone booth on 53rd and 5th, and I just took that as my office. I used
Right.
to get that number out. I had sent a script out that I'd written what they call an over the transom submission. It means, no connection, no nothing. Just here's a letter, here's the script. I left that office number as my phone number, my phone booth number. And believe it or not, I got a call from Fred Spector from CAA. I got signed by that agent, who never knew that he was calling me on a phone booth on 53rd and 5th. And they thought Bobby would like it too. And I thought, Bobby Duvall. Oh, yeah, of
Right.
course. Yes, Bobby.
Welcome
Bobby.
to the CoachMD podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. And that's why I started the Coach MD podcast, because I wanted to bring people discussions and experiences that people have that contribute to total wellness. And part of that total wellness is the spiritual aspect of our health and what we are what our beliefs are, what our feelings are towards really what all of us are going to face eventually, and that's death. And that shapes our entire life, whether we admit it or not, or know it or not. It's always in the background. It's always something that's lingering there, that's influencing what we do in our life, and especially when we're dealing with health, when we're dealing with good health or poor health. It's always we're thinking about that. And my guest today, coming on in a conversation that I'm really happy and excited to have, is John Gray. And John Gray is a Hollywood director, producer, writer. John was had a big hit show in the 2000s, from 2005 to 2010, called The Ghost Whisperer, which really touches upon a lot of spiritual aspects of life and death. And I really want to get his take on all of that, and how it influenced, how he was influenced by to write that show, and just the impact that it had on so many people. And John, thank you so much for coming on. I really
Oh, great. I'm
excited.
happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, you know, um, yeah, I know that you're from Brooklyn. Okay, you're just a
Yes.
guy from Brooklyn, right? So how does a guy from Brooklyn get to well, we know there's a lot of guys from Brooklyn who got to Hollywood, but how did John Gray, what was your journey like getting to the spot where you
Well,
are?
I credit a lot of it to just pure ignorance. I grew up in Brooklyn. My father was an iron worker. My mother worked for the city. I had no connection whatsoever to to show business. Um, and so it never really occurred to me just how difficult it would be
Right.
to break through. And if I knew, I may not have stuck with
Right.
it. I always
Yeah,
believed it was going to happen tomorrow.
right.
So I just never lost that belief. But if someone had sat me down and said, John, it's going to be about 12 years of starving and eating your shoes and
Right.
rejection. And, maybe I would have said, do something else.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anybody who knew better, so
Right.
I just kept at it.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Now, was there I remember maybe hearing you talk about this or reading it, that there was something with with a telephone booth in Manhattan or something, that was your office, or how did that work?
Yeah. Well, one of my many starvation jobs when
Right.
I was coming of age, I used to work for CBS, not in the glamorous, production end of things,
Right.
but I used to be a recruiter, which meant that I would stand on a street corner and try to get people to come in to test their shows. I would be paid per person who I got to come in to test their shows. And so I was on 53rd and 5th. And at that time, your phone booths are kind of a thing of the past now,
Right.
but this would have been like in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there was a phone booth on 53rd and 5th, and I just took that as my office. I used
Right.
to get that number out. And people would call me there, and that kind of thing. And when I first, I, I I had sent a script out that I'd written. It's a long. I'll try to tell the whole long story, but
Yeah.
we had heard a rumor that the actor John Savage, who was a nephew of Robert Duvall,
Mm.
they wanted to do a movie together. And I had this movie about a father and son, a team of ironworkers. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. So I sent it to Robert Duvall's agent, what they call an over the transom submission. It means, no connection, no nothing. Just here's a
Right.
letter, here's the script. And who knew?
Right.
And I left that office number as my phone number, my phone booth number. And believe it or not, I got a call from Fred Spector from CAA, and they really liked the script, and they thought Bobby would like it too. And I thought, Bobby Duvall. Oh yeah, of
Right.
course, yes, Bobby,
Yeah.
Bobby.
Right.
So, um, and that's how I mean. Ultimately, I got signed by that agent, who never knew that he was calling me on a phone booth on 53rd and 5th.
Right.
And although Robert Duvall did not make the movie, ultimately we did make it with Carl Malden and Lenny Von Dolen.
Wow. Great.
And that was the beginning of my career, really. Once I got signed with that agent,
Yeah.
things kind of took off for me.
Wow, that's great. Now, yeah, it's interesting as you talk about, your very modest beginnings and you're not having that uh really that kind of almost the pressure that somebody may have not had the modest beginnings or that expectation and how that mindset was able to propel you. But you had to have some skills, right? You had to have something. So that script, um, you obviously the ideas that went into that. What were some of the things that kind because what I'm exploring here is again the strong mind, healthy body, and unshakable spirit. It's all a combination that goes into us living satisfying, successful lives, and the mindset is a big part of that. So a lot of people, especially young people, when they are coming from, let's say, a modest beginning, don't have that confidence and but some people who may not even have a skill set, have something in them that they know is a talent, even though they are coming from that modest beginning that their parents may have not had that certain talent. When did you notice that there may have been something in you that could kind of put together and look at your life, look at your uh modest, I hate to keep using that word, but that
Was.
that kind of blue collar that life
Yeah.
and be able to convert it into something that to tell a story.
Well, I think part of it is that as a kid, I felt things very deeply.
Mm,
I had a really, really strong sense of empathy, and uh, my emotions were always really, really on the surface, and I could access them really, easily. And so I saw things happen around me that I felt I wanted to tell stories about.
mm,
And I was also very susceptible to storytelling myself as a viewer. I would go to the movies or I watch something on television. And what I remember most about those experiences when they were really resonant with me is that I could have an experience in a movie theater where I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone because here's a character here they're going through something I've gone through, having a
yeah.
fear that I've had, And I think that's a great gift of storytelling is that you can reach out to people and say, hey, guess what? Other people feel the same way. You're not alone. And here's what we do. And so I remember at a very young age thinking to myself, I would love to give this feeling to
Wow.
somebody. I'd love to be able to make somebody feel a little less alone and
Mm,
share this kind of emotional thing. And so that's a big part of I think what it was. And then I think I was also very, very lucky in being blessed with the curiosity. I was always curious about people, about things, about learning. I didn't go to college because it just wasn't part of the culture really in my
yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
The idea mostly in my neighborhood was get your high school diploma, preferably Catholic school,
Right.
and go to work. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
get a job at Benny's. So college, for many people was just like was a 4-year excuse to not work.
Yeah.
But the fact I didn't go to college didn't stop me from learning, and I just made it my business to just learn as much as I could, and I did that mostly by reading.
Yeah.
I read, I looked up what, and when I say look up, of course, I'm talking about pre-internet. So I'd have to
Right.
go to a library and look these things up.
Right.
But what were the classic books? What were the classic, and I discovered Hemingway and Thomas Mann, all these things that I
Mm,
just started reading and learning about. And I think ultimately helped teach me about storytelling without me even realizing it.
yeah.
Just kind
Yeah.
of planting those seeds about wanting to tell stories. So, um, by the time I was ready to start thinking like, okay, this is really what I want to do with my life, um, I was really steeped already in storytelling and, art.
Yeah.
And another thing that was hugely helpful for me was when I was about 15 or 16, living in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn. And again, wanting so badly to be a filmmaker, I had made a lot of Super 8 movies
Right.
um, with my friends, did that kind of thing. But still longing for that connection with people who could help bring me to the next level and were as serious as I was because I was always
Mm,
frustrated. Because my friends, they got a kick out of helping me, but no one really was passionate enough about it to work hard. Because making movies, no matter what level you're doing it,
hey, right.
hard.
Yeah.
And so they get bored easily. I want to play baseball. I'm done with this. I'm not gonna meet you at 8 o'clock in the morning. Forget it. So I really longed to
Right.
people like me who were willing to do that. And so in my neighborhood, a film club opened up called the Bay Ridge Film Workshop.
Wow.
It was like a gift. I couldn't
Yeah,
believe it.
wow.
And it was financed by the Brooklyn Arts and Cultural Association, BACA. And it was two guys, Armand Mastriani and Kelly Van Horn. And Armand and I are still close to this day.
Mm,
Like 1974 or something this happened.
wow.
But they were looking for, filmmakers. And, compared to the other people they were talking to, I was like Orson Welles. I mean, I'd done so many Super 8 films and
Right.
I'd done, and I was so committed. I was so wanting to. So I was first there when they opened up, and they were able to give me little grants to make 16 millimeter films, which is like a
Wow.
huge leap.
Yeah.
And what the bigger thing though is that they introduced me to the world outside of Bay Ridge.
Mm,
Because they were from Manhattan, they were from areas out, and so I started expanding that circle. And when I made these movies, I started using professional actors and getting into relationships with those actors, and they lived in Manhattan, and they introduced me to the world of theater, and so it just became this kind of
mm,
blossoming that I owe to the movie business, just
yeah.
because without it, I'd probably still be in Bay Ridge today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a good job with Benny's.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thinking about your experience at the library and reading those authors, and what comes to mind is that, um, somebody who, you felt from an early age, and I think I would also put myself in that category of having that empathy, really feeling for the human condition. And in those stories that those great authors wrote about, you probably found characters in it. Well, you did find characters in it that that portrayed, that those feelings, those emotions, and because I know, especially some authors who really didn't, were really right out there, were very raw, like Hemingway, very raw. I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't really have to. It wasn't nuanced. You didn't have to go to college and English class to kind of sift through it. I mean, it was right out there, and
Yeah.
so, um, it's just Brooklyn, I guess, because there's so many people in such a small amount of area. It's really, you have the exposure to so many different people and so many different just experiences right in front of you. And I could see how being an empathetic person, it can really, or as they call it today, an empath. Okay, that's
Yes.
like the new word, an empath. John Gray, you're an empath.
I'm
Okay,
an empath.
okay. I like the old school empathetic. You were an empathetic kid,
Yeah.
but you felt it, and I could see how so many artists, from filmmakers to comedians, a lot of comedians, because it's sometimes, if the human condition is so sad sometimes that if you don't laugh about it, you're going to get depressed. So I could see how a lot of comedians come out of Brooklyn because they just have to make fun of
Yeah.
what the experience is. Yeah. So, yeah, so that kind of got you going, and I love that. Really, I love that. And you said, now the first, what was this was kind of a mini break, that introduction, and you didn't go to college, and which to me, in a lot of respects, is a greater benefit, because I like to always pull Albert Einstein into the equation, how he always was a very modest guy, even though he had great education. He was a genius, obviously, but he always said that if you couldn't explain something to a fifth grader or something, then you didn't really understand it.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
really, you don't have to go to college to explain something to a fifth grader. And so many people go to college, get lost in all the weeds, and like those characters in those great novels, they so just esoteric stuff, instead of, this person lost their mother when they were 3 years old. What does that feel like? And
Right.
or
Right.
they're caught in a dilemma that's a catch 22, and they just, you can feel it, you can know what they're going through, and you don't really have to break it down, but creating those stories to tell those stories, I think, is important. And so what was, okay, so you had that film group that started in
Yes.
Brooklyn. What was was that your, well, I guess the getting the agent was a big break. Was there
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
certainly the biggest break. I mean, before that, I what had happened was that I had managed to get a small agent in New York, based on a couple of scripts I'd written, and that agent hooked me up with a New York producer who was doing these things called at that time it was called the ABC Afternoon Special.
Oh,
They were
yes.
like
I
hour and a
remember
half.
that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he hooked me up with that producer, and that producer, two of them, Tony Mark and Sujette, um, became lifelong friends. I could never get one of those shows to direct. I was so young, but we became lifelong friends, and
Mm.
I showed them the script that I had about this father and son, ironworkers, and they said, "We want to make this with you. We have no way to do it either.
Mm.
And we have no money. We have no,
Right.
but we love this and we want to do it." And so we kind of teamed up, and so that was a huge break. And then a couple of years later, I got the creative artist agency signed me, and then it didn't happen right away, but I started being able to write scripts for a living.
Mm.
I didn't have to have the starvation jobs anymore. And then it took another, I don't know, it probably took another 2 years or so, and then I finally did get that movie made with Tony and Sue, and then
Yeah.
once that happened, then at least I never had to work outside the business again. I didn't have to
Yeah.
sell cookbooks, didn't have to bartend.
Right.
What
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you do what you have to do,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I guess that, the saying is that overnight success takes about 10 years, but luckily you had it a little bit earlier, but the afternoon special was perfect because they the way ABC did that was when kids were coming home from school. So so the father and the son iron workers was not on that though. Was that
No, no, that
never
that was meant to be a feature film,
feature film? Okay.
and but the script became sort of a calling card.
Gotcha.
People didn't want to make the movie, but they liked the writing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about the afternoon special, that was produced out of New York by a company called Daniel Wilson Productions, and they were based on 8th Avenue and 55th Street. And I found out about them, and I started. I wrangled a meeting with this woman. I'll never forget her name, Linda Marmelstein.
Mm.
And it sounded like character out of Dickens.
Yes,
And
definitely.
she had liked a couple of my 16 millimeter films that I made through the film workshop. And so she called me for a meeting. But I was like maybe 19 and I looked like I was 16.
Yeah.
I did not present well. I didn't know about dressing. I didn't know anything, just didn't know any of that stuff. So I met with her and she immediately said, "There's no way I can get you approved by a network, but thanks for coming in."
Right.
And so I started the Let John Gray Direct campaign where every week I sent her something else. Like first week, I got 100 helium balloons with Let John Gray Direct on them. And I tied them around the parking meters around the building. I put them in her elevator. I had a bunch of them delivered to her office. Then the next week, my mother made this gigantic sheet cake with Let John Gray Direct on it. And had a singing telegram sent to their office. So finally, she called me and said, "Look, this is all very charming. I have no more room in my office for any of this stuff. So stop sending me things. But I will send you to this company I know in Washington, D.C. They're doing PBS shows. They're looking for non-DGA, non-guild, non-union directors, basically. So I put in a good word for you." So I spoke to those people. They were like, "Okay, well, come in and we like your work. Come on down." And I went down to Washington. I had to go on a train. I went down there. I had to hitch a ride out to Northern Virginia where they were. I didn't even know how to drive. And again, they took one look at me and they said, "No, thanks for coming."
Right.
And I did the Let John Gray Direct campaign with them. And then ultimately, they gave me a 15-minute film to direct. It was for a local political club in Washington. It was a fiction film about teenage alcoholism that they were using
Mm.
to try to raise awareness. And I did this film. It was my first paid directing job. And then I went on to work for them for many years afterwards, doing directing a bunch of things, for them. But
Yeah.
anyway, it just I think it's if nothing else, it just shows you that if you could be annoying and
Right.
persistent, you know,
Right. Well, kind of circling back to, talk about mindset, you're going through this, you basically had a no quit mindset, that nothing was going to stop you. And you felt, it sounds like that you recognized that you did have a talent with that ability to tell stories. And one thing I've noticed in your work, it seems as though all your work that I've seen always has a twist to it. Has just a great twist. And if my listeners haven't watched any of John Gray's stuff, we'll talk about specific work that you've done that we're going to recommend later. But it always has a twist. And what which really just blows me away sometimes because you just don't know when it's coming, and it's so beautiful. Um, were there any filmmakers or any directors that you specifically look to as inspiration? Old shows, for instance, shows of the early '60s or '70s, or
yeah.
writers from that
Well,
period?
first, let me say this
Yeah,
about talent. You
yeah.
talked about,
Okay.
I know did I feel like I had talent? And I would say I had need
Mm,
more than talent.
Yeah.
I needed to do this with my
Wow.
life. And
Okay.
part of it was because I didn't think I could do anything else. I just
Yeah.
didn't have any passion for anything else. I don't think I had any talent for anything else. My father was an iron worker. My brother was an iron worker. I had no talent for that whatsoever. I envied them.
Mm.
They could put shit together, and
Yeah.
I couldn't do any of that stuff. Um, I could just tell stories. So part of the no quit thing was like, there's nothing else for me.
Wow.
I
That's
got to make
great.
this work.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah.
That's it. I'm going to be miserable if I can't do this.
Yeah.
Um, and I was also very lucky in being steeped early in the great filmmakers from the golden age of Hollywood.
Mm.
I'll never forget the summer that I had. It was probably 1977. I was maybe 18, and two of my favorite movie theaters in Manhattan, the Bleecker Street Cinema and the Carnegie Hall Cinema, both are long gone.
Yeah.
But in the pre-VHS, certainly pre-streaming era, they were revival houses. They showed pristine prints of old movies.
Mm.
And both of those theaters in that one particular summer did the whole summer devoted to the movies of the 30s and 40s, the big studio films.
Yeah.
And so I would literally see 6 movies a weekend, 3 double features Friday,
Mm.
Saturday, Sunday. And I would watch movies the way my parents got to see them, Casablanca on a big screen,
Yeah. Wow.
you know, with
Yeah.
a packed audience. And I will never forget coming out of those theaters, on a hot summer night on Bleecker Street or on
Mm.
57th Street, and feeling like so many different feelings of just of possibility and
Mm.
excitement,
Yes.
and this is what I want to do, and this is it's inspiration.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
inspired, but also kind of lonely because they don't want to really share it with because nobody
Right.
really understood, this the same passion. So it's a very
Yeah.
bittersweet sort of memory
Sure.
to have about that.
Sure.
But it
Yeah.
was a great education for me in storytelling and in dialogue and characterization. Lacking film school, it was about the next best thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think about my, watching films when I was a kid. And I just remember that feeling I remember seeing Star Wars for the first time, and I brought my brother who's about 7 years younger than me, and I was 17, he was 10 or whatever. And I'm driving the car like it's a spaceship, I mean, I'm just feeling so
Right.
empowered, or seeing Rocky for the first time, or something, just I know that feeling,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really, that great feeling. And it's interesting that, because where you come from, and you talk about the iron workers, and kind of the blue collar community that you're surrounded by, and um, but being able to take that human condition and understand the struggles and the challenges of of people's experiences, and everybody, no matter what community they come from, excuse me, whether it's a white collar or well-to-do, or if it's a lower class or a everyone has different experiences. It's the human condition. And I've written about that, and we've talked about that.
Mm.
And I think about your brother, Tommy, because I know your brother, Tommy, and he said to me one of the most profound uh, uh, analogy, or analyses of kind of breaking down what I talk about in some of my writing, and he kind of really encapsulated. And here's a guy, iron worker all his life, right? Guys on the 50, I don't know, 100 feet up, 200 feet up on a beam or whatever. And he told me the greatest analysis, and it was that it's the difference between, and he probably doesn't even remember telling me this, but I remember, and it came from him, the difference between possibility and probability. So as a doctor, people come to me with all different types of complaints, like they have shoulder pain. Oh, doc, my shoulder hurts, right? And so, is it cancer? All right. So our brain, our what I call automatic brain,
Yeah.
processes possibility, but not really probability. And we think that our our physical senses and our the real world and those things that are beyond our emotions that are tangible, we think that that's the ultimate logical analysis or logical way that our brain is going to work. But really, it isn't. So if somebody comes in to me and says, "Oh, my shoulder hurts, can it be cancer?" Well, the possibility is, yeah, it could be cancer. Okay. It's a very small probability, but there's a possibility. So, what many of us do and what gets us hung up is that we focus on the possibility of things, of the worst thing that could kill us, rather than living the probability part. And your brother, the iron worker, said that to me.
Mm.
Okay. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of your material was extracted just from the people around you, because everyone, no matter who you are, has experiences and lives life, and they may not be able to put things art in an articulate way, but empathy is really the
Yeah.
thing that separates everything. And for you to feel that and then convert it into storytelling is really
It
terrific.
could also be interpreted in that kind of a community as a weakness.
Yes.
And I always remember my mother, God bless her. I have so many fond memories of my mother. One of my favorite ones is that one of her friends growing up, all of us together, and I was friends with my mother's friends' kids. And my mother's friend made the observation to my mom that, Johnny, he's very sensitive. And my mother said, "There's nothing wrong with my son."
Right.
So I always thought that was great. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And, I had this saying because when I started writing and you were at you got some of those first emails that I used to put out before I wrote my book, Brain Drain.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, I shared some very deeply personal things that happened in my life. And I had this saying that vulnerability was my greatest asset, because I was hesitant at first to share. Like, here's a doctor sharing these experiences with people. What are people going to think about? Are people going to respect me as a doctor anymore? But it turned out that people started respecting me more. And I looked to a story of a friend who was a really very successful banker, and he led a whole team. And one day he got some news and he was in tears. And somebody walked into his office and saw him. And he thought that that was the end. Nobody was going to respect him anymore. It turned out his whole department turned around. Everybody loved him more and
Mm.
respected him more because they were afraid of him before,
Right.
didn't really like him that much before. But now they saw that he was human,
Yeah.
and that human condition was really,
Yeah.
upfront and, personal, and that really, so vulnerability can be an asset, but it's hard, especially if you're younger. Our brain tells us we have to do every by all means necessary to fight or flee danger, threat, or vulnerability, because that puts us in a place where we can be hurt. And
Mm.
so knowing that we have that stronger divine or emotional part of us, and if we're able to travel in that segment, in that kind of that divine inspiration, it can be empowering, and it
Yeah.
created a career for you, that started in your 20s. Now, I know that in your 20s, something happened. You experienced a medical condition, medical problem. If you wouldn't mind kind of going into that, how that kind of segued with your career, or
Yeah,
maybe.
it was a very frightening thing. And I was at the beginning of my career. I was, I guess, 20, I don't know, 27 or 28, somewhere in that vicinity. 20, I think it was 28. And I just made the decision um, to move to Los Angeles and try to. I couldn't really get things going in New York, so I wanted to try to go out to LA and see if I could make things happen there. And I realized you can't just be a temporary visitor. You got to go out there and really plant yourself.
Yeah.
And I had an agent, and that was all good. But even the agent said to me, "I could do much more for you if you were here."
Mm,
And so I made the move, and I started getting sick. I started feeling sick,
mm,
um, with fevers and chills, and we'd go away for a couple of days, and we'd come back, and it would be worse. And I was really getting rattled by it. And
mm,
I went to several doctors. No one could really figure out what it was. One doctor thought it was just some sort of a virus, illness, whatever it was, and he put me on antibiotics. And then my agent sent me to this hematologist, this big hematologist at the Cedar Sinai. And this blood doctor, he's going to get to the bottom of this. This guy's great. And I met this doctor, and I'm sure you've met doctors like this. Very arrogant,
yeah.
very sure of himself.
No, I haven't, Chuck.
No, you haven't.
No,
No, no.
no, no. There's nobody like that. Come
Right.
on.
And
Yeah.
that's why so many people love you, because
Right.
you're the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, this guy, I should have known I was in trouble when, within like 10 minutes of us sitting down, he was telling me about his screenplay. And he was, yeah. So he gave me all these tests and could come up with nothing. I told him the medications I was on, including antibiotics, and he gave me all kinds of tests. And so one of the tests that he gave me, echo, I think it was, revealed that I had a bicuspid aortic valve.
Mm,
And he said, you have to watch that, because when you're in your 50s, that might get leaky and it may have to be replaced, but don't, that's then. Don't worry about it. So, okay. But I still kept getting sick. It wouldn't go away. And
mm.
they started getting annoyed with me.
Yeah.
Like, you won't admit that you're not sick. This is, and he said to me at one point, you have got to get on with your life.
Wow. Wow.
And so I thought, I got to go back to New York and find like a better doctor.
Yeah. Wow.
So I did. And I've been sick now for months, and now my heart's pounding. I'm having trouble sleeping.
Mm,
I can't breathe right. I have to sleep sitting up because I can't breathe when I'm lying down.
mm.
So I go to a doctor in New York, and I've forgotten his name now, but just a brilliant doctor. And he examines me. He flicks my fingernails, and he asks me what medications I'm on. And I give him the whole story, and he tells me that he gives me a blood test with his culture.
Yeah.
It's going to take a few days for this to come back, but he goes, I'm very certain you have
Endocarditis. Yeah.
subacute bacterial endocarditis.
Yeah. Wow.
And the reason the other doctor missed it was because the antibiotics apparently mask
Mm,
the culture shows up negative with the antibiotics.
right. Right.
So, and at that point, it was pretty far gone. So it's confirmed. Yes, I have this
Mm,
endocarditis. So he said you have to go in the hospital for 15 days for an intense course of intravenous antibiotics, and that should take care of it. And I'm like, 15 days? You kid?
yeah.
It's got to be in the hospital. It's got to be like around the clock. And so I did that for 15 days. I come out of the hospital. I go back out to LA, trying to just like get my career going, and I'm sick still. I'm
Mm,
really, really sick. And in the meantime, I'd gone to Japan for a film festival,
wow.
and I got so sick I had to be taken by ambulance
Oh
to the
my God.
hospital, taken by a stretcher out of the the
Wow.
hotel to a hospital where I couldn't. No one could speak English. I couldn't speak the language. It was
Mm,
just horrible. So I go back to New York. I tell the doctor, I'm still sick. I don't feel right. Give me more tests. It turns out that the valve, the aortic valve, the infection is so far gone that it has eaten away the valve.
yeah.
Got to have a valve replaced like right
Mm,
away. So now I'm 29 years old and I'm looking at open heart surgery. You know,
wow.
it's like, wow, man.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I had one of the best surgeons, do the open heart surgery. It happened a few days before my 30th birthday.
Mm,
1970, no, 1980. I've forgotten the year now. Anyway, I
yeah.
think it was 1970. I don't know. The year's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
A
Right.
long time
And
ago.
Early 80s, late 70s.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, no, no. Actually, 80s, 80s, right? Yeah.
it must have been the 80s, yeah, because I
80s, yeah.
was
Yeah.
29. So,
Yeah.
um, and it was a really traumatic experience and scary. I had no money. The Writers Guild had just gone on strike.
Hmm.
1988, because that was
Okay.
the year of the strike.
Yeah.
So, I had just gotten a notice in the mail that my health insurance from the Writers Guild was suspended because I
Oh,
hadn't
God.
worked in so long. But I was able to finesse that by saying, because they sent me a registered letter.
Mm.
I had never signed for it. And so I was able to say, hey, I never got this letter. So I'm
Wow.
going to
Good.
Cobra thing.
Yeah.
And they had to take me into Cobra.
Yeah.
So I had to find $300 a month at that time to do it, but at least I could get the insurance.
Yeah.
And I had a terrible experience. I woke up during the surgery.
What was that like? Jeez.
Oh, it was
Oh,
just, I mean, really, really scary. And I remember it very vividly. And I remembered it the minute I, came out of the anesthesia. But basically, what happened was that the doctor explained to me that because I was having congestive heart failure as a symptom of the bad valve, they could only give me a certain amount of anesthetic.
mm.
And it was a 50-50 chance whether I would go out the whole
Wow.
time or not.
Wow.
And so I did wake up during a key part of the procedure, which was horrifying and painful. And I remember feeling that I knew there was a presence right near me, and I knew that my hands were up by my ears, my arms were like this. I could feel that,
Yeah.
and I was doing everything I could to just move a finger, just to let them know. What I didn't know is my eyes were taped shut.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I couldn't
Oh,
move, I couldn't do anything. And of course, as you know,
yeah.
you're a paralyzing agent,
Yes. Yeah.
twitch. So I could not remove anyway. So anyway, I don't know how long I was up. I was awake. I'm sure it was mere seconds. It felt like hours. But when I came to in the recovery room, the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes is a woman next to me on a slab, um, staring at me. Her head turned to the side. She's on a respirator, and her eyes are open, and she's blue.
Oh, God.
This woman's dead. There's no
Oh, God.
question.
Oh, my God.
And I think to myself, I'm where the dead people are.
Right.
I must be
Right.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm on a respirator. I can't speak or anything, but I remembered waking up, and I thought, for some reason, I just thought it was critical that I let them know this happened. So every time I came to, I would remember it and like clock it. I got to remember this. And then as soon as I was awake enough and somebody came over to me to check on me, I made a motion to write, and I wrote down, I woke up during. And so I could tell the nurse wasn't quite sure, like, what is this,
Right. Yeah.
craziness? But anyway, ultimately, I became like a celebrity in the hospital because, oh, here's the guy who woke up.
Right.
And the anesthetist came to me and said that they suspected it because my blood pressure would spike every time they touched
Wow.
me.
Yeah.
And so, and then that's when they explained to me that, they didn't really know that they're going to give me so much anesthetic. And I'm so glad they didn't warn me of that beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It would have been, horrible. And I did check on the woman next to me, and she had died during her surgery.
Oh, God.
And they had to keep her where she was until they could notify her family and the rest of it. So they had to keep her on a respirator. And, so
Yeah.
the experience was
Yeah.
really intense and difficult, and the recovery was difficult and painful. And it was the first time I could really understand why people got hooked on opioids,
Yeah.
um, because I was in so much pain, with the incision and that whole area.
Mm.
Take a Vicodin or whatever it was they gave me. I forgot what it even is now. And I would suddenly, once it kicked in, and I could just unclench and
Yeah.
not feel the pain and feel euphoria.
Yeah.
I started to understand this is why people do this, man, because
Yes.
like
Yeah.
compared to what I'm going through now, I'll do anything to keep this feeling going.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it was a difficult time, but when I look back on it in retrospect, I also realize, as upset as I was that my career was in the toilet at that point and I couldn't get arrested, it was the right time because this was waiting for me around the corner. And so once I had this past me, within a year after the surgery, then my career started to happen.
Yeah.
Started to,
Wow.
get successful and start getting, yeah, and it all just kind of took off. And I'm so, I'm grateful now that it didn't get interrupted by this. There was nothing to interrupt. So this happened to me. I got it over with, you know,
Yeah.
and, off I went.
Wow. Well, I think it's the reason why you became successful is because just people felt bad for you, so
Yeah,
they
that's right. Well, I
it's,
remember
oh, that the poor sucker almost died.
right, yeah. Well,
right.
two things that stick out.
Yeah.
One is that I had a prosthetic valve put in,
Yeah.
and it was loud. And
Right.
doctors warned me that you're going to hear a ticking. Don't let it freak you out. And I remember in my hospital room, like a day or so after the surgery, I kept thinking about my watch. My watch is just so loud.
Yeah.
I realized I'm not wearing a watch. And I remembered, and I would have people turn around to me in movie theaters
Right.
and say, "Could you take off that watch, please?"
Right.
And when I finally got to be shooting again, the sound person
Right.
would
Oh,
say,
wow.
"Who's got that
Right.
watch?"
Right.
So I had one of our costume designers actually made me a soundproof vest that I had to wear on set and zip it up to my chin.
Wow.
Awful, this thing.
Wow.
But the really scary thing happened was on the second movie I made after the surgery. Um, on the first day of shooting, and like every movie you do, you have to get a physical, and it's for the insurance companies,
Wow.
the
Didn't know that.
actor,
Okay.
yeah, the
Yeah.
director. And so picture really sure you're not about to drop dead or anything like
Right. Right.
that, because it's a
Investment
grueling
and yeah.
experience, and it's going to be for however many days.
Yeah.
So and it's a bit of a cynical thing. Usually, they just kind of wave a wand over you and say, "Okay, yes, you're good." Especially someone my age. I was
Right.
30. But when I reported to this one doctor who did it that I had this valve on the first day of shooting, the producer came to me and said, "John, you've been turned down. The insurance
Oh, go, come on. Gosh.
we may have to we may have to replace you. We
Oh,
can't."
God.
And that was really scary to think about. My career
Yeah.
is now not going to happen. But we overcame that, and they the doctors all weighed in and said, "Look, this guy, I didn't have the heart surgery because of lifestyle issues. It wasn't because of
Right.
eating too much fat. I
Right.
had
Right.
a misshapen valve. I had a genetic
Yeah.
valve that was bad. So
Right.
anyway, it was fine. And I went on to do whatever it was, 30 more movies. you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But boy,
Well,
that was scary.
yeah. So just, for the listeners, that bicuspid valve, the normal aorta has three valves, tricuspid valve. So a bicuspid valve puts you at a, like John was talking about, it could be that when you get older, it starts leaking, and usually when it's detected early on because there's a heart murmur, but if it's not detected and it's not opening quite exactly right with the blood flow, bacteria, because we have bacteria circulating in our blood all the time, which is usually handled by our immune system. But sometimes, if you have a bad valve or the valve is damaged in slight way, the bacteria can sometimes lodge on the valve, and once it's there, it's very hard to get it off. And so you had that that experience. So yeah, I mean, seeing now, thinking about some of the films you made and starting to kind of think about the spiritual aspect of our lives. And here you kind of, I mean, you didn't die, but you had as close to a near death experience by waking up and not being able to move and seeing what's going, or feeling what's going on around you, as one would in a near death experience. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit now about. I mean, you've made so many different movies, and uh, I'd love to be able to talk more about them, but right now I kind of want to zone in a little bit about probably arguably your biggest success, correct me if I'm wrong, which was the television series The Ghost Whisperer. which came out in 2005. It aired
Mm.
first season 2005, and that is such is is really grounded in such a spiritual realm, with the main character being able to see people who are dead and communicate with them, and kind of solve, help people who are living solve problems through knowledge that the dead are communicating with her about. So I'm just curious how you came about that, and we talked a little bit in the past about what you thought might have been why that show was so successful.
Well, it was a great experience doing that show. I was very fortunate to get it. And what happened was that I had had a really good relationship with CBS because I'd done many, many movies for CBS. And, it's the kind of thing where I would write a movie for them, they'd approve it, and I'd just go off and make it. And
Mm,
very little interference. We just had this great mutual trust, and it was fantastic. And one of the executives of CBS called me and said, "So look, we just flew in a person who can see dead people and can convince the dead who have not crossed over, who are stuck here, to cross over. And we just had them come out and cleared my house of ghosts." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes. I
Wha-
don't sound crazy, but we've had we believe are ghosts."
this is the CBS executive.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And this woman lives in Ohio, and so they brought her out, and she cleared her house of the ghost. The ghost went away, and her name was Marianne. And the executive said, "I just wonder if there's a series in this somehow, or other. I don't know.
Wow.
Would
Wow.
you meet with her?" And I could not have been less interested in doing a series at the time because I loved doing movies. It was just the
Yeah.
greatest thing ever. I loved it. But I was intrigued to meet this woman, and she was in LA. I was in LA at the time, so we met, and uh, I was expecting, I don't know, some exotic woman. I
Right.
don't know what
Right. Right.
And so we go into the Starbucks in Studio City, and I see this woman sitting there, um, just like normal salt of the earth kind of woman. She's sitting with a guy who's got tattoos and a crew cut, ex-Marine.
Yeah.
And it's them. It's Marianne and her husband Ted, and she's Midwest, normal.
Right.
Just your aunt.
Right. Right.
And we sat and we talked, and she told me that she grew up being able to see the dead,
Wow.
and it took her a long time as a kid to realize, like, oh, no one else can see these people, only I can see them, and that she helps them with their unfinished business so they can cross over. And some of them are frightened to cross over. Some of them don't know they're dead.
Mm,
And don't want to admit they're dead. And so she can help them do that. And so, do I believe this at the time? I don't know, but I
right.
I, I smell a great story.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
I said to her, so I said, did the dead appear to you all the time? She said, yes, they're just around us everywhere. I said, right here at the Starbucks. She says,
Mm.
yes, there are three dead people right now.
Wow. Holy
And I
cow.
said,
It's
and she
me
pointed out,
chills. Yeah.
yeah, because there's somebody over this guy's shoulder, watching him type something. She looks very sad. I think it's his mother. There's someone over here, and that scene is actually in the pilot of Ghost Whisperer, where Melinda talks about the people in that Starbucks.
Yes.
And so I remember driving away from that meeting thinking, boy, I love horror and I love emotional drama,
Yeah.
character-driven drama. And I'm really fascinated with the idea of, is there life after death? And so here's a chance to fuse those three interests into one thing. And so I signed on. I said, I'll definitely write this pilot. It'll probably never get made.
Right.
So few pilots do, but I'll have fun writing it and all that. But they liked the pilot a lot, and they said, "Well, let's shoot the pilot and see what happens." I thought, "All right, I'll do the pilot. I'll direct the pilot. The series will never get picked up because they never do." And so I shot the pilot, and we had a great time. And then they said, "Well, let's do 13 episodes." I was like,
Wow.
"Oh no,
Whoa.
I have to do this 13 more times."
All
And
right.
then after the 13, they said, "Here's your back nine," and that's a full season. And then we went off for 5 more seasons, after that. And the public really, it struck a chord with people. And one of the reasons, I think you and I spoke about this in the
Yeah.
past, I think, is because that was a time we were not that far away from 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like there was a hunger out there
Mm.
for, if not answers, at least, hope. Is there more than just this? Do people still interact with us even if we're not aware of it after death? And I think that's part of the reason why the show struck a chord and lasted as long as it did. And we got so many letters and so many. It just affected so many people, and it was very rewarding in that way.
Yeah. So, as a physician, so many times would be at a patient's bed who was dying, and I would tell, or they died, and I would talk to their family, and I said, "Oh, they're in a better place now, and it's their time, and all that." But do you 100% believe that, and really feel it and trust it and embody it? And I have to say, I've always had a lot of faith in a higher power, higher being. I feel that's God. That's my belief. Um, but if you really put a gun to someone's head is a little extreme, but if you did and said, "Do you really believe that?" I mean, there's always a little doubt. Is this all that there is? So it wasn't until I started really exploring those people who went through the near death experience and listened to those stories, hundreds of them. I've listened to tens of them, maybe, I don't know, 40 or 50, or read about them. There's tens of thousands of them, and they're so rich, and they're so uh, powerful and almost confirmatory. And when you talk to somebody like for the woman that you spoke with, and even just watching your show, and I would recommend people to go back, and it's on Hulu, The Ghost Whisperer. It's on Hulu. You can easily find the whole seasons on Hulu. And I would even, especially now when the near death experience is being talked about so much more freely than it was when I was younger, earlier in my career, and even a lot more than since I've left my career. Maybe that's because I've just been so interested in it.
Mm.
Um, and even those that talk about hellish experiences. And it's interesting because one of the episodes that I watched recently, The Ghost Whisperer, wasn't quite the devil, but it was a character who, in somebody, and I don't want to be a spoiler or tell you which one that episode that was, but I know you know it, but for the audience, it was very interesting and similar to how people choose, and actually when they die, before they truly go into heaven or hell, let's say, they kind of have a choice, and even when they're dead and certain characteristics. And that's why with Melinda, Jennifer Love Hewitt's character in The Ghost Whisperer, really, kind of sorts that out. And, she does such a great job, and such a great writing job that you did in directing. And what I love about the show also, and I want to talk about some of your other works, again, what I talked about before is how you understand human emotion for your empathy, and kind of how to play with that in a way, in a good way, to really drive home the hook at the end of emotion. So it's not infrequent where you watch one of your productions and you feel that tug at the end, that emotion, that tears. And some of your short films I've seen in White Irish Drinkers, and even in Ghost Whisperer. You had my wife crying, and me, tearing up a little bit, watching it. So, those are like, I don't know. obviously, do you come up with, you come up with those, do you come up with it before you start writing? After, does it seem to start developing? You see an opening? Like, how does that work? Because they're so powerful. And what are some of your favorite ones that you've done?
Well, I mean, to answer the first question, I mean,
Yeah.
there's something really cathartic, about as
Yes.
a viewer,
Yeah.
you like you go to the movies and you cry, and you, no matter how sad the movie is, you come out of it, you feel cleansed somehow. You feel
Yes. Yeah.
like you've had something taken away,
Definitely.
that in a good way.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in that feeling. I love having it, and I like trying to provide it if
Mm,
I can.
yes.
And um, I just try to, I don't know yeah, I just try to make people feel.
Yeah.
It's what I love most about and reading, and the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do. I used to joke um, when we shot Ghost Whisperer on the Universal lot, in California, and
So that wasn't Rockland County?
it was not Rockland County.
No.
Nope,
But
nope.
it was Grandview. No.
We used to get a lot of letters about that too.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
how can I find an apartment there?
Right.
But I used to, oftentimes big feature films would come and shoot there as well. Like Michael Bay would make a big, we have to juggle like when we're going to use the back lot, when they want to use it, and I got into a debate once with one of these directors about, they were sort of looking down on us. Well, you're a TV, you're a
Right.
television, you're a big feature film. We're doing these big things, and I said, you might think you're doing big things, and of course you are in a certain way,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really take that much talent to make things explode. I mean,
Right.
it's about having the resources, having the physics, understanding the physics, and having the time. And you do endless takes. You
Mm.
you have all the toys at your disposal to make two cars, fly up in the air and crash together, big spectacle. It's fantastic. But you got to be an idiot. You
Right.
can't do that with all the resources that are available to you. However, now put two people in a room
Yeah.
and make something happen between them
Yeah.
that you
Wow.
care about, that can make you cry.
Yeah.
That's not so easy. you know,
Yeah.
we used to have these debates about that kind of thing. It's like,
Well, I think you won that debate as far as I'm concerned.
right,
Yeah.
what's easier?
Yeah. Well, a couple of the White Irish Drinkers, which the film you made, that was after the Ghost Whisperer, right? It was
It was actually we shot that in 2009, so we
okay.
were in our last, like our junior year of Ghost Whisperer.
Yeah.
We
And
shot that.
yeah, love that. And um it's a great film. Where's it available now? Streaming services?
You can get it on iTunes. I don't know. It used to be on Netflix. I'm not sure if it still is. You can definitely get it on Amazon.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I recommend it. White Irish Drinkers, powerful film, having the twists and the turns, and definitely you feel it. I love your short films. I haven't seen some of your earlier work, but what is some of the earlier films? I know you made one about Charles Manson. Wasn't that a big film that you
that
made?
was called Helter Skelter,
Okay,
and
yeah.
there had been a movie based on the Vincent Bugliosi book called Helter Skelter. I think the movie was made in 1979 for TV, but that movie basically covered the trial of Charles Manson.
Hmm.
And so I was offered the opportunity to at first remake that movie, but I wanted to do not so much a remake as a prequel. I wanted to do
Wow.
anything that led up to the trial, and sure, like my movie ends the night before the trial starts,
Wow.
and because I was fascinated by how these young people were turned into these killers. How
Yeah.
this happened. It was amazing. So
Yeah.
that was a wonderful experience, making that film, very immersive. That was a 3 hour uh, movie for CBS, and with a great cast, and just a lot of, not a lot of. I mean, there was certainly a lot of humanity in it, but a lot of dark,
Yes.
dark
Yeah.
humor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, obviously, the human psyche and how that plays into human relationships and the development of toxicity like that, and the ability for somebody to take over somebody's brain. I look at it as brain. I separate brain and mind all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
and be able to manipulate that and draw them in to some sickness. But some of your short films that have really um, resonated with me was the Christmas story that you told. That was
Mm.
a powerful one, and also the one where you had the man at the nursing home, where
Yes.
and another
Excellent.
one, you know. So that seems to be what you're doing more now, or creating short films.
Yes, I find, at this stage of my career now, I'm 66. I've made, I don't know, 22 or 23 movies, and I don't even know how many episodes I've directed and all those kinds of things.
Yeah,
And as you get older and the business changes, there's more interest in younger people making films, and so it becomes more and more difficult to sell your ideas and get stuff out there. And you start to ask yourself, am I still chasing this? Why am I still chasing this? Ghost Whisperer was very good to me financially, so we're comfortable and safe and all that. And so I kind of got to the point where I thought, I still have stories I want to tell. Hollywood is not that interested in me telling those stories anymore.
right,
So what do I do? And I chose to not give up and to keep telling the stories. So now my wife and I produce these short films. I finance them myself, which is the least fun part of it.
right, right.
We do one a year, and it's great because not only do I get to tell my stories, but I get to do it without any interference. I don't have to play Mother May I with any network or
Right.
studio. There's
Yeah.
no notes.
Yeah.
Um, it's purely creative, and I seek out notes. I ask people for opinions. I've asked you for opinions on things.
Yeah.
So it's not like I feel like I've got all the answers, but
Right.
it's a great comfort to know that I can seek opinions and weigh them and choose the ones that are helpful, discard the ones that aren't, and know that I can never be forced to do something stupid,
Yeah.
because the
Right.
network is afraid of something. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So and we go on, we show them at film festivals, and that's also been just an eye-opening experience because now I'm so immersed in this world. We get to travel. This year alone, we've been to San Francisco, Cambria, California, Austin, um, Sedona. We just came back from Boston. Um, we're going to Fire Island Film
Nice.
Festival.
Wow. Nice. Fun.
And I get to meet, young filmmakers. I was going to say other young filmmakers. So
Right. Right. Well,
I think of myself that way,
you're young. You're young.
but we get to see their films and see what they're doing. And I always do seminars at these festivals. I teach about directing actors and pitching, try to spread the knowledge. And it's incredibly rewarding and fun. And the thing that's great about it that I love that I didn't get in television is that I get to sit in a theater
Mm,
at these film festivals with hundreds of people, and I get to see the films on a big screen and enjoy it with an audience,
yeah.
which in television you don't get to do, even though you might know there are 10 million people watching my show right now.
Yeah.
But where are they?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're out there in the ether.
Right.
I can sit and I can hear people gasp, I can hear them sniffle, I can hear them
Wow.
respond. So it's been a great turn of events for me that I didn't really expect.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep doing it as long as I can afford to keep doing it.
Right. I love that. Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, it's in some ways it's like theater, where you get that instant feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and for an artist, because you are an artist, you were able to take your inner being, your inner self, and create it on a palette of paper and computer and craft stories that really uh, inspire and bring out people's emotions, and just the fact that you were able to make the ghost whisperer, to create it, it just it kind of tells the world just how deep John Gray is, just how empathetic, and just how, not only are you feeling and have that connection with the living, but you have that curiosity of um, possibly emotions that go beyond. And one thing I could say is that that woman looking at you when she was dead, when you saw her dead, that's helped you with your portrayals of dead people, because they're pretty they're
Right.
pretty accurate.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I do have the morbid fascination, with,
right,
I did
right.
a movie, I did a short film called The Desecrated,
Oh yes,
which
yes.
takes place in a morgue, and the entire movie is about the preparation of this corpse. And so we had this actress playing this corpse, and I studied so many photos of dead faces
Wow.
to try to get the reality of what, because in the movies it's, they're sleeping peacefully, or they're, you know, but the reality is more banal. There's just
Yes.
people look like they're mildly interested in something, that they're just looking over here. So that movie, we tried very hard to get I drove the poor actress crazy,
Right.
trying to get her to be exactly right.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah, well, it's great talking with you, John, because I try to you know, the basis of my podcast is, mind, body, and spirit, and
Mm,
it's really how people's life experience creates their total wellness. And total wellness, when we think of, especially going to a doctor, it's always about, oh, I'm sick, I need to go to my doctor or whatever. But really, doctors are help people manage life, their whole life,
yes.
because
Yeah.
it's not only our body, you have our mind, and you, as a young child, you're experiencing, having different experiences with different culture, but having something yearning inside of you that might be a little different. And then, your thoughts and curiosity about the life after death, and
Mm,
how that, and then your you know having the experience that you did with your the health crisis that you had. I mean, all of these go into creating a life, and really a full life. And I really appreciate you, coming on to share that with me and my audience.
oh,
uh
my pleasure. Of course.
yeah, yeah. So
Hope they're still awake.
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's a good thing about they can tune in and out. So if they did fall asleep,
Right.
we can they can pause it or retract. So, but anyway, I really encourage anybody who's listening to tune in, look anything John Gray, look it up and watch it. It's better. The Ghost Whisperer is really a gem. It's really a gem that is still out there, and it really will bring out a lot of different emotions. So I'd like to sign off right now, as you know, Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD, urging you always to stay strong in mind, in body, and in soul. Bye for now.